Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States, serving from 1861 to his assassination in 1865. He played a large role in the emancipation of slaves during the United States Civil War. Though he was fundamentally against slavery and found it morally wrong, Lincoln could not directly free the slaves early in the war due to fear that border states would defect to the Confederacy, which would be detrimental to the preservation of the Union. Preserving the Union was extremely important to Lincoln and was his priority during the Civil War. Nearing the end of the first year of the war, Lincoln attempted to initiate a plan which was called compensated emancipation. The goal of this was to offer border states money in return for the freedom of their slaves. Lincoln thought that if he were able to diplomatically solve the slave situation in the border states and emancipate the slaves on terms that the border states agreed with, said states would have no motive or desire to secede from the Union. Lincoln also saw this as a way to end the war faster. While Lincoln pursued compensated emancipation, he was pressured to allow blacks to enlist in the military as an alternate form of emancipation. Lincoln saw this as too harsh and a tactic that could potentially alienate the border states to the point of secession, so he held off. When Lincoln proposed the bill that would allow the possibility of compensated emancipation, it passed in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. Not one supporting vote, however, came from a border state Democrat. The only place that ended up receiving contemplated emancipation was the District of Columbia. Lincoln grew frustrated with the stubbornness of the border states. As he explained in a letter to politician Albert Hodges, they declined the proposition, and I was, in my best judgment, driven to the alternative of either surrendering the Union and with it the Constitution, or laying strong hand upon the colored element. I chose the latter. In choosing it, I hoped for a greater gain than loss, but of this I was not entirely confident. At this point, Lincoln saw no option but to endorse the decision to allow black men to enlist in the military. Congress passed the Militia Act, which would allow blacks to serve in segregated regiments called the USCT, or United States Colored Troops, and would in return grant them their freedom. In his letter to Hodges, which was written approximately 1 year after the Militia Act was passed, he explains the outcome of this decision. More than a year of trial now shows no loss by it in our foreign relations, none in our home popular sentiment, none in our white military force, no loss by it anyhow or anywhere. On the contrary, it shows a gain of quite 130,000 soldiers, seamen, and laborers. Lincoln explains to Hodges the undeniable benefit of the addition of African American troops to the Union Army. Though the addition of black troops to the Union Army was clearly a massive help to the North, not all Union Army men or Republicans were supportive of this measure. Black troops in the Union Army often faced race-based discrimination, being stuck with non-combat jobs and cleaning up after white soldiers. Some white soldiers would eventually be persuaded by the heroic acts of African American soldiers when they were needed for battle, especially in the later stages of the war. Though racism was still prevalent throughout the Union Army and the North as a whole, black soldiers in the USCT would earn the respect of military commanders because of the extent to which they assisted the Union victory. Were it not for Lincoln's decision to enact this measure, the Civil War and the rights of black men in America could have been changed drastically.